Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ask the Planman. Everything you want to know about insurance, finance, and more, but we're afraid to ask. I'm your host, Bruce Weinstein, and today we're going to be discussing with Jeff Savlov the biggest challenges for family-owned businesses. And that has to do with the next generation and the succession and transition plans the families struggle to put together and sometimes execute. Many times, family disagreements will splinter the family into irreconcilable differences. Jeff holds a master's of social work from Rutgers University and specializes in group dynamics and family systems therapy. More to come. Jeff understands firsthand the challenges of balancing the interplay between family and business and the devastation that can befall an otherwise healthy business. If things are not properly managed and executed, the business can collapse. Jeff has helped families understand and manage the complexity, develop the next generation to be prepared and strengthen the family and their enterprise. Jeff has consulted on relationship and team dynamics with Fortune 500 companies such as Bristol-Myers Squibb, Johnson & Johnson, and Schering-Plough, to name a few. Jeff, welcome to Ask the Planman. Let me start you off here. How did you get started in this arena?
Hey, Bruce, thanks for having me. So, like many others who do what I do, and there aren't a ton of us, but many of us out there came from a family business. My family had a commercial printing business in New York City. I was involved in small ways from middle school through high school, and then it got much more serious when I was in college, when I was really needing to decide if I was going to do it full time or what my career would be. The business got really busy. My dad was under a lot of stress, and he took out the stress on me because it's always easier to take it out on family than the employees who aren't related to you. And I really said, hey, this is not good. Let's get someone to help us. I found a consultant who had a family therapy and business consulting background like I have now, and that's sort of foreshadowing for the rest of my story. But this woman helped us a real great deal. My mom and sisters who weren't part of the business were part of working with that therapist, really transformative for our family. And it led me to say, one, I want to have a relationship with my dad that's father-son. I don't want this boss-employee thing. It's not working for me. And two, and this doesn't happen often enough in families, I decided to say, is this the best thing for me? I wanted to see what I could do on my own. Could I get my own job? Could I get a promotion? Could I succeed completely separate from my family? That was a healthy challenge for me. And often in family businesses, people are brought into the family business without really testing themselves in the real world. I left. I went into sales and marketing in the corporate world, not family business, worked in consumer products and technology, had a good run at a young age. But that experience with the therapist I told you about, it really stuck with me. And I went back to grad school. I got similar kinds of training in family systems theory and family and group dynamics, got trained as a family therapist, and 30 years ago, started a practice in talk therapy, and just by coincidence, had clients coming to me for therapy that had businesses, and I got to see them on a really deep level, and I said, there's something needed here that's different than what a psychologist does, but it includes part of that, but it's also different than what wealth managers and lawyers and accountants are doing. And so I started this niche practice in the middle of all that, where family dynamics and emotion and relationships intersects with sharing a business and generational transitions of a business and other kinds of wealth, and how do you develop leadership and even raise children in that context.
Congratulations, because it certainly sounds like you found your calling, and we knew each other about 10 years or so, and I've always been impressed with what you do and how you deliver what you do. So I was watching a show the other day, which is, I think it's called The Gilded Age, and it was back in the late 1800s when all this revolution was going on with the lumber and the railroads, and right, and the father and son dynamic played out exactly as you were describing. The son wanted to go be an architect, and the father wanted him to come into the business, and the kid had no desire to want to be in the lumber, railroad, finance thing. And yet the father, way different 100 years later, but the father put his foot down and said, you're absolutely not going to be an architect. You're going to be in the business. And the kid was imploring him of like, well, it's just not what I want to do. So back then you weren't really given the choice, maybe today more so. But as you and I've discussed over the years, and I've heard some of the interactions, like we're not just talking like you got to be a billionaire type size family, although those are, equally having problems, moving them down the family lines. But, you could just be the local plumber. You could have any kind of business where you're building up something. And as the parent, you and I are both parents, is you'd like to have the legacy where the children have the viability to keep the business going. But then again, if my son and I are not getting along, you and your dad aren't getting along. Again, another side note, my middle son, I asked to help take over some of my social media because he's so big in doing the social media. And he's like, I don't want to work with you. I want to just keep our father-son dynamic. I'll do my thing, you do your thing, and hire somebody else. And I'm like, okay.
There's a lot of love in a choice like that.
Sure, because you don't want to be screaming at somebody or fire your child at some point if it doesn't go well.
Yeah, the story you bring up really highlights two of the classic mistakes, which is forcing someone into any business, but it happens more in family businesses, right? It doesn't happen in the corporate world. They can encourage you with money, but you can walk away and not lose your family. In family business, you see people really strong-arming people into the business that don't want to be there, big mistake, or allowing people into the business that have nothing to offer the business. They just don't have any other skills and haven't developed them.
Right. The special child that you just got to find a place to give them a job.
Or even a competent child that just doesn't want to go out on their own and really develop themselves before they come in.
Yeah. The word nepotism, how much of that do you see or have struggled with as you're saying that point is the prodigal son is getting anointed, but they're really not the right person to lead the company. And yet let's say the strong underling, a CFO of some kind who is not family should be anointed, and they just won't because of the nepotism of keeping it in the family. And then they lose.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Right?
Or the youngest daughter. With a lot of traditional families, it's the firstborn son. Maybe the youngest daughter has an MBA. I've seen this, has an MBA and has real skills and worked for 5 or 7 years in the corporate world. But because they're youngest, because they're female, but that's changing. I see the gender roles changing more in family business than in the corporate world, and the research bears that out. Sure.
The female CEO demographics have been notoriously understaffed, but that has definitely changed. On that note, how much female business owners of that kind of ilk or success have you encountered the last decade or so? Do you see a change in that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Paradigm?
There are more female CEOs in family businesses than in the sort of corporate world at large, and more independent directors in family businesses than in the corporate world at large. So I think change, it comes more quickly for family businesses. And that's true just in a general business sense. Family-owned businesses tend to pivot, to use the word from COVID that has gotten overused probably, but I'll use it, pivot more quickly because they can make decisions as a small ownership group, or at least even a large ownership group when the family ownership group is really together on the vision of what they're trying to accomplish. They can make quick decisions and just generally handle change. So I think in terms of gender and women having more opportunity, and also just in terms of general business, making quick decisions strategically, family businesses have a real advantage there.
Have you found, it may not be a fair question and not to put you on the spot, do you find that working with the female leader of a family business versus a male is a little easier, or are they just as hard-lined and hammering them again, you and I come from similar backgrounds, and the old school way, depending on your heritage and your family lines, was you did what the patriarch of the family did and wanted, and we all was fed down from that. And you were told you'd go to law school, you go to med school, like you had to have a pedigree of some kind. And it's not, I just wanted to be a musician, right? Like I don't want to go to law school. And so you bucked the trend as the years went by. So the curiosity is, now that there's more women in place, do you think they're just as passionate with their drive that they want for their children, or maybe a little more relenting in the sense of, well, if that's not what they want to do, that's okay with me?
I mean, it's interesting with CEOs of family businesses who are in their 70s and 80s, even a little older, from the more traditional generation. I think there's a real difference between those guys and female CEOs, females in their 30s, 40s, 50s, because the women in the 30s, 40s, 50s, in my opinion, it's a different generation. They feel comfortable bringing some of the relationship skills that sometimes come a little bit more naturally to women than certainly men in their 70s and 80s. But in general, in this younger generation, I think both males and females feel they don't have to be the drill sergeant of World War II, and men and women that are in this younger generation tend to be more comfortable with relationship skills. But I think there is a sense in which, for whatever reason, women still have a little bit of a emotional intelligence advantage. Not always, but I do see a little bit of a tilt, and that it helps them as CEOs, as leaders. I think it's really an advantage men can learn from.
So thank you for that response. I agree with you. I think there's the shift has occurred from the generation to the generation. You and I grew up, and we were brought up a certain way, and you learned to do certain things, and then we were given the leash where you can kind of make your own decisions, and you didn't necessarily have to do it that way, and you kind of learned what not to do. Like that, for me, I'm a pragmatist in that regard of like, that didn't work. When I saw my parents do it, I'm going to do it this way. So the show is Ask the Plan Man, and the undercurrent of our show is everybody should have a plan, whether it's a financial plan, a retirement plan, an estate plan, and business plans. And so we keep adding segments into the show for the business owner, and that's why I wanted to have you here, because there are challenges that the business owner faces, and we want people to have a plan of what to execute, whether it's starting the business, transitioning the business, exiting the business, and certainly when the family dynamic comes into play. And here's your sweet spot of your niche is, well, how will we get over some of that if the senior member of the family wants to sell and the son wants to keep it, or the daughter wants to keep it, and they can't decide, is it the best time? So the couple of thoughts for questions I had for you is, A, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've encountered? And then let's lead from there of explaining your process of how you help people with that. So give us a couple of maybe the top, let's just say 3 challenges that you find to be either the most repetitive or consistent, and then what your process might look like to help people.
So I'll answer in terms of plans, which you seem to like. But I think having a parenting plan, literally for how you parent young children when there's a family business involved, it's important. And this is one of the biggest problems I see. I was working with a 3rd generation construction company recently, and the firstborn in the 3rd generation, so the oldest of all the cousins, was told from a very young age, someday you're going to be the head of all this. You're going to be the head of all your little cousins, and they would name the cousins, and you're going to be the head, and look at the big building, and you're going to be the head of that, just like grandpa is. Well, this kid was 8 years old. Turns out when he was 40, he didn't have the skills, and he was causing a lot of havoc. So one plan is just, as a parent, when the kids are very young, instead of saying someday this will all be yours to an 8-year-old when you don't know their skill set in 40 years, say something like, hey, isn't this cool what grandpa started? If you want to be involved in it someday, you're going to show us that you can be a hard worker, and that you like the kind of jobs that we do building stuff, and that you can make it even better than grandpa did. That's what we want to see from you and all your cousins, not offering someone a CEO position when they're 8 years old. And that's a form of plan. And I'm really big on conscious parenting of young children in the family business environment. Another piece, which is a big issue I see and also relates to a plan, is when the next generation enters the business, that's a time to really have what I call development plans, family development plans. So I like a policy of how family members enter the business, and I help clients write those all the time. Some people insist that they get a college degree or go to a related technical school or learn a trade that can help the business, but you got to do something before you come in to show your willingness to learn. And then some people say you can come in the business, but you can't be an executive until you have done X, Y, and Z. Maybe you leave and get an MBA. Maybe you work for another business. Maybe I've seen family businesses get a someone in the same industry on the other side of the country that's not a competitor and send their kid there for 2 years to learn all about it, but in a different environment. So development plans and being really formal about what you have to do to get in the business, and then what do we expect you to learn in the first 2 years that you're here? What are the accomplishments? Who's going to teach you? How are we going to measure if you're getting success? And not in a punitive or punishing way, but in a, we want to support you to be successful because we're the family, and if we're not doing our job, and that's where these things fall apart. The family member who works in the business doesn't do their job, assigns their stuff to non-family team members because they're the boss's son or daughter. That's where this stuff gets really ugly and the culture becomes toxic.
They're anointed without earning it, and a class mistake. So I'm listening to you, and I'm thinking back when my older son was playing Pop Warner. And I was the offensive coach, and my friend Greg was the defensive coach, and both of our boys played, and we just split the responsibilities, right? Well, he couldn't talk to his son and tell him what to do because his kid would backmouth him in front of everybody. And so did mine. Mine treated me the same way. And at 10, 12 years of age, that dynamic of the power and the control, and it's coaching and it's football. It's not $1 billion business or $100 million business. But we basically went to the side and we're like, all right, you coach your kid, and I'll coach your kid, you coach my kid. And we took that dynamic away so that there was none of that combustion. And so my son answered to Greg and his son answered to me. And if you don't see that lesson at 10 or 12, now you're bringing them into the business and you've opened up that door. You've given them carte blanche. You've maybe have, most families have done, spoiled with the silver spoon, who have the affluence. And then all of a sudden, the kid's just a rich, spoiled brat, right? And they're not ready to mature and grow up to take over the manifold of a business. And it's a problem that you now have to unring that bell. And there's a book I read years ago, The Millionaire Next Door, which talks about a number of different facets, but one of them is the dynamic with the children and how the children are brought into and seeing the wealth, whether it's the guy who just is the janitor at the local school versus the big executive, and how they each treated or brought up their children to respect and see money. And so it just kind of goes to that core. So go ahead. I just kind of wanted to.
Yeah, no, that's great. Two things my dad and I agreed we were never going to do again was have him coach me in a sport and have him be my boss. And our relationship was wonderful until, he passed a few years ago, but it made a big difference. And another area of my practice that's growing, because I have this clinical background and I used to work as a play therapist with really young children, I'm an expert in child development and parenting. And I developed the Purposeful Legacy Family Project, where I work with parents that had really created significant wealth through their businesses or inherited it. But I work with parents before kids are even born or before they're even 5 years old. Around how do you parent when you have this kind of affluence, and how do you do it in a way that you'll have good, productive, responsible kids who are going to respect the business and the employees and work really hard. And it goes back to really before kids turn 5 years old. There's plenty of stuff you can do to create that foundation.
It's interesting. Last night over dinner with another couple, the conversation was around, and you've heard it, the cliche, like there's no parenting manual, right? Like, I mean, there's books and, but like raising your children is a learn on the job experience, because the textbook doesn't know what kind of child I'm dealing with, right? what their personality is, whether they're a spectrum, autism or God forbid, anything, or just a normal child that, we have trouble as adults interacting with people as grown-ups, let alone this little baby that's going to morph into something big and what their personality is. So it's awesome that you've been able to create something, because again, depending on where and what the people have from their business, their children are going to be involved one way or the other. They're going to be forced into it, or they're going to be bystanders looking to get into it and held at bay, and the family just not letting them in the business could be just as detrimental as letting them in the business.
Yeah, no, True? Absolutely. I worked recently with a couple high school sweethearts, worked really hard, saved $250,000, which is not extreme wealth, but they bet it all on an operating business. It was in cannabis, which is really risky in the sort of the marijuana play. And over the last 7 years, they came close to losing it all several times. The husband worked really hard with a good team to grow it, but just in the last year, everything popped, and it's worth $120 million, that $250,000. When they called me for this, the parenting program I do, they had a newborn, a 1.5-year-old, and a 3.5-year-old, and they really wanted the tips. And when they reached out to me, they were very skeptical that there was anything they could do. When I talked to them about some of the simple things, which has to do with, having even a 1.5-year-old carry a napkin to each place setting at the table while the older brother or sister is putting a plate and a fork and carrying it back to the dishwasher at the end instead of the parents doing all that. It sounds small, but at that age, it's the difference between things are done for me and I just walk to the table, eat, and walk away versus I set the table, I clean up afterwards. And there's a lot of ways, even at 4, 5, 6 years old, petting the dog or, brushing the dog, feeding the dog, filling water in the dog's bowl, cleaning up the poop in the yard from the dog, even putting a plant in a child's room and making sure they water it regularly. If they don't, it dies and they learn a lesson. If they do it, it blooms. And it's those little things that say you're part of this household. And before kids even understand money or a business, they understand that I am part of our family and I contribute.
You're giving them some responsibility, which becomes somewhat rewarding. Even if it's washing the dishes, there's an accomplishment, which is a sense of fulfillment. How many times you see again, I'll reference TV shows where the older kids are given chores and the 3-year-old's going, I want to wash the dishes. I want to do the laundry, because they want to participate. They're seeing their older siblings doing stuff and they're just kind of sitting around like, I got nothing to do. How come I can't do the laundry?
Yeah, Bruce,
right? And so
you nailed it, man. You nailed it right there. I like to say what 2 and 3 and 4-year-olds love to do, you'll never get a 17-year-old to do if they haven't done it before.
Right, exactly. Look, I'll be 59, and my wife jokes every time I unload the dishwasher, I crow like a peacock, like, check me out, I just did the dishwasher. And she's like, you're proud of yourself? Yeah, you're proud of yourself? Because I don't contribute that much around the kitchen. And it's like, let me do this for her, because I know she hates doing it. And then she's like, you're beaming. I'm like, well, because I did something. I felt like I contributed, right? So you don't have to be 3 or 63. There's always a sense of fulfillment in doing something that we're contributors to society, right? Our show is a contributor to society. You want to give something back, and this is why I enjoy doing it so much. So, you gave us a couple of challenges. Was there another one that you feel is a strong?
So we have parenting, we have develop the kids, and then meritocracy. A meritocracy is an organization where you enter it because you earn it, you get paid because you earn it, and you get promoted because you earn it. And most family businesses say, yeah, the senior person will say, yes, we have a meritocracy. But when you dig deep, a lot of them just aren't doing it in a true merit, in the true fashion of a meritocracy.
So I'm making sure I'm hearing you right. Merit, MERIT, merit. Is that's
right? Based on merit.
Gotcha. So,
an organization based on merit, and I see it all the time. If you have, so many ideas at once. DNA, right? If you're really tall, both parents are tall, there's a good chance you'll have a tall kid. But if both parents are entrepreneurs, there's no genetic predisposition to having an entrepreneur. So you need to really assess your kids, put them in a role where they can contribute, not put them higher than they can contribute and tell them they're doing a great job or just be angry at them. Maybe you need to get a non-family CEO. I was just working with a really successful business here in New Jersey, and the truth was the brother and the sister were ready to take over, but not to be president of the company. And so they brought in an outside president while they stayed in roles that they were really good at and they could contribute, but they actually hired someone to be above them, which is a real sign of a healthy family culture. Let's assess, let's be realistic, and let's get somebody else. If we don't have the tools, maybe we'll grow into it, maybe we won't, but we're doing the right thing by our business and our non-family employees. There's no better way to ruin the culture and the spirit of your non-family employees by seeing an incompetent or a less than ideal role filled by a family member as opposed to hiring someone else. So and that's hard, because that could mean saying to your oldest son that his, younger sister, like we used before as an example, is really the one who's cut out for it. And that can cause really hard feelings in a family. So the younger you start this, and it goes back to those development plans and entering the business, being really clear, you're entering this business that we created, you're going to earn your place wherever it is, and whoever in the family enters the business is going to do the same thing. And it may be a non-family person that works their way up to CEO, it may be one of you, but being clear about that up front makes all the difference. When there's a lack of clarity, and then everybody's in their 30s or 40s and thinking, hey, I thought I was going to be the CEO, when they don't have the skills, I've seen real pain. And I've seen grandparents that aren't seeing their grandkids because they're not allowed, because someone didn't get the position they thought they would have. I've seen real pain.
Spite is real. Spite's a big problem. This may not be a fair question, and I certainly don't expect you to divulge any names for sure. But so you gave the cannabis people where the 250 turned into hundreds of over $100 million. So awesome for them. Let's reverse that. What did you encounter that was such a train wreck that you couldn't even help fix it? Like, how bad do you have like, this was like a nightmare case I could never help because the dynamics were so bad? Is that fair to even share? Again, I don't want you to give away any confidentiality for sure.
So let me think. It's interesting how you define sort of the train wreck aspect of it. So one example was you had a founder of a business. He grew it. It got really successful and big, and he gifted it to his son. Okay, so the son was gifted the business, and he worked hard and he earned it. As that son got older and older, and the father passed away, then the son became the father. Right, the second generation guy had a kid. And the personality of that second generation father who had been gifted the business, he refused to let go of the reins. He never thought his son was good enough. I was brought in by a friend of the family who thought that the son was good enough, and he really seemed to be. And the father was so old that this is the second generation guy who had been gifted the business himself, that he started to have some dementia. He was very angry. His judgment was off. And the son walked out of the business and said, I've been here for 30 years. I was promised CEO. I have proven myself. And all of the non-family people at the business say that I've proven myself. I'm not coming back to the business until you make me president and CEO and transfer the ownership just like you promised and just like you had. The son, this is the third generation, was only asking for the same thing that the father had gotten. But between dementia and old age and a different personality than the founder, that second generation guy was refused. So I was brought in to see if I could be helpful. But the truth was he refused to budge. The dementia was growing, waiting so long to do any kind of planning around capacity, mental capacity and stuff. You couldn't talk to him about anything like that. He'd be insulted. And so they wound up, he died, and the son sold the business for half of what it was worth, and never walked back in, and they never really reconciled their relationship. That's kind of one example along the lines of what you're asking.
Yeah, I'm trying to give the audience a sense. Again, like anything else, it's learning's in the pain, right? Every lesson comes from a failure usually, and you want to fail forward, and that's life's lessons, and then overcoming those challenges or problems. So for the grandson in that case to not step in and do what's best for him and walk away, I'm sure he found a new path and had to find peace in that decision. And, if dad's not there, mentally, that's really hard to overcome. So health issues as we age, and what we talk about in the planning process of the estate plan and, the succession planning of things, they all go hand in hand. And you can't get insurance once you're uninsurable, and you can't get your senile old man to move the business over after he's senile and doesn't know who you are. And that's
right. Replanning is so crucial. I strongly recommend and help families develop all the time a plan way earlier than when someone's in their 80s and the next generation's in their 50s. Much earlier. Have step by step, every 5 years, what's going to happen. If you do X, Y, and Z, you're going to get this much ownership. You're going to earn this. We're going to commit to these milestones. We're going to have non-family people involved in assessing it. I'm a big fan of a board of directors, even small companies. Some family business owners owners are nervous about a fiduciary board. They feel like they're giving control of their company to these outsiders. The truth is the owners can always vote out all the board members and make themselves the board. But what the advantage is having trusted outside people who are objective, helping you do what you say you're going to do and follow through, and letting you know if you're making a mistake. And invariably, most business owners, family business owners, and most business owners of private businesses are nervous early on about boards. Once they do it, they feel like it's the best thing they ever did, and it makes so much sense. If you pick the right people, don't pick your golf buddies who are just going to blow smoke.
Right. Yes, men. You don't want
No, you want people who are unrelated.
Women.
They're not making money off of you anyway, and are going to be. They have skill set. They can help with growth. They can help with finance. Whatever. You really pick them based on what they can offer and objectivity, and really help plan these transitions. And you may have 3 kids that are all developing toward a CEO role, and they know that there's an element of competition, and we're going to see through fair evaluations who's best, and you know that, and you accept it or you leave.
You mentioned about the planning and the earlier waiting to not waiting till you're in your 80s. And the most common thing I say to clients is your financial plan is obsolete the second we finish it. It's just like computer technology. The second you buy your new laptop, it's obsolete because the next generation's already underway, right? The speed of the chip, whatever the processor is. So your financial plan, and this is a line I use, is it's just a Polaroid, for those who know what a Polaroid is, but just a photo in the film of life. Life is just constantly moving. The markets have changed. Ownership has changed. Taxation has changed. Your age and health has changed. All you can do is put some sense of a blueprint and a plan in place, and then manage to that, but be prepared to constantly monitor and alter it. So whether it's your plan or your succession plan or somebody's estate or financial plan, you're not done the day you paid the bill to the attorney to put it in place. It's a work in progress. Until you're gone, it's always going to be subject to change. Agree?
Yeah. And there's all forms of governance for families. I mean, there's the classic idea of governance, a board of directors, but there's governance along the lines of a family employment policy, like I've described, and development plans. And as families get into the 3rd generation, you can have many cousins. Certainly the 4th generation, I've worked with families where there were 75 or 100 cousins. Imagine 75 or 100 cousins making a decision about, do we give dividends or do we plow it back in the company? You need governance. You need to develop subgroups of people who are doing the work of the group and going back and forth between the larger family group and the business and the board. And that kind of stuff becomes essential. But you don't have to be a giant billion-dollar business to have basic forms of governance that help you to formalize all this stuff. Because I say there's a concept I derived and I write about, toxic informality. And there's a lot of it in family business. Toxic informality, a level of, we'll just figure it out. We'll just kind of wing it. We've always done it this way. That can bring down the family and the business.
It's called procrastination, right? It's just, I'm not ready to address it. I don't want to be a grown up. I don't want to be responsible for those decisions. So give us a walkthrough of what your process might look like for the listener out there that's contemplating, hey, maybe I need to speak to somebody like Jeff. You can work with anybody around the country. It's not like you mentioned you're in New Jersey, but you're not limited to working in New Jersey. So let's be clear for the listener out there. So, and we're going to put Jeff's contact in there in the show notes below. Bear with us on that. We'll get that out to you. But what's your process for somebody that you're pursuing or coming to you? What do you take them through? What are the steps? Because we have our planning process, right? So what's the process look like?
So typically for a business owner, I will, and some of the families I work with sold businesses and don't even have a business anymore. So that's just important for listeners to know. They have legacy wealth and they still share, real estate, investments, trusts, foundations without an actual business. But all of those assets are so complex, they need to develop leadership and make decisions as a group. So when someone comes to me, typically I want to meet with several, depending on the size, surprised if I can meet with all of the family members in the business. I just got a call this morning, and it's two brothers and mom and dad, and I don't want to just have a call with one of them. I want to get all four of them together on a video call. I'll spend an hour. I don't charge for it. They can ask me questions. They can learn about me. I want to learn a lot about them. And if we both feel like this is a good fit, let's take another step. I'll travel to them, and it's a nominal fee. If I have to fly, they pay my travel and a nominal fee, but I will spend half a day with them. And whereas when I was younger in my consulting career, I would do the hour call and then write up a proposal, I found that I wasn't learning enough to really write a good proposal. This half day has been really the most important change I've made in my process. And there's so much value for the client, because now I'm spending a half a day, I'm at their business or maybe the family home. I can meet with them in different subgroups, the senior generation, the rising generation, both of them together. And then if they feel like this is still a really good fit, for no additional charge, I'll write up a proposal, and we can go back and forth on the proposal as often as necessary until they can say, this is exactly what we want to achieve. This is our history, our goals and objectives. This is it. And we talk about their budget and the amount of time they have, because these families are busy. Do you have once a month? Do you have twice a month? And we develop a budget for time and get the fees real clear up front. And then I usually scope out a year, and we go quarter by quarter. I put in writing that you can get rid of me anytime without any obligation. You're not committed to this year. I'm just laying out how complex the situation is and what it's going to take to get you where you want to go. Sometimes after a year, they like what I'm bringing and they don't need as much. And so we'll do quarterly meetings or once a month, whatever's needed. I'm really flexible about where people are at and how can I serve them. But that's generally the process.
Thank you. Appreciate you sharing that. And I always try and put the so what's in the message for my audience is there's a difference between being proactive and reactive. It's going to make Jeff's job easier. It's going to make my job easier for people who are proactive and out in front of things than, as Jeff shared with you, his fail story, where he couldn't help them, is he walked into a very reactive situation that was late in the game and he couldn't right the ship. The plane was in a nosedive. So proactivity is the key to any financial advisor, any advisor, planning advisors, the right word, not financial. The planning advisors you work with is the proactivity to think through the steps of where Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind and work it back. So what are we trying to encounter? And whether it's somebody like Jeff to help you with the psychological barriers and the challenges and the dynamics there, whether it's your estate planner, your tax planner, your financial planner, whatever it is, the planners need to be proactive with you. So I hope that gives the audience a good so what there. So how can people reach you? Again, we'll put your contact info in the show notes, but why don't you give a shout out to your phone number, email, whatever it is. How can people reach Jeff? And if they need to speak with him,
Yep.
Go ahead.
It's blumandSavlov.com. That's BLUMANDSAVLOV, blumandSavlov.com. I'm Jeff Savlov, SAVLOV. Google Jeff Savlov Family Business, Family Wealth, blumandSavlov.com. Any of those will get you to me. I have case studies. I have a lot of blogs. I write a popular blog, and there's a lot to read there, and you can sort of see where I'm speaking, what I'm up to.
Terrific. Again, we'll have that in the show notes, and you could always reach Jeff through us here at Ask the Planman. Please like, subscribe, share with this if you know fellow business owners or people who have family challenges, family dynamics that are having challenges, and you think they should speak to Jeff. That's why we have him out here today. And as he shared, no cost or obligation to get that initial conversation going for an hour or so with the family. So please hit us up here at Ask the Planman. You got Bruce at asktheplanman.com. Keep sending us your questions or challenges you have. You can find our website, www.asktheplanman, our toll-free number, 844-PLANMAN. Jeffrey, thank you so much. It's very intriguing. I'm glad you're able to join us today. Appreciate having you here, and I hope it resonates with the part of the audience that really needs to step up and take action and be corrective. Remember, folks, when you need advice, always get it right. Come ask the Planman. Again, thanks to my guest, Jeff Savlov, today.